Good afternoon, guys. I'm glad that you're all here, taking some interest and some initiative in wanting to be more physically active and make your guys' lives better for the long run, starting now. So I think that's the big thing when we talk about physical activity, is that there are many benefits that will help you down the road when you're older. But do we actually know what those benefits are? If it's true, if YOLO, you only live once, then why wouldn't we take advantage of those benefits more often than Americans do? We don't really take advantage of these benefits. And yes, there are risks to physical activity, but I'm here to convince you that the benefits outweigh the risks for you guys. So let's define some things. Physical activity is any bodily movement produced by the contraction of skeletal muscle that result in a substantial increase in caloric requirements over resting energy expenditure. So any kind of physical activity that just gets your heart up a little bit, get your blood moving, get your blood flowing. Exercise is more narrow. It is a type of physical activity. It's planned, it's structured, repetitive bodily movement done to improve and or maintain one or more components of physical fitness. So there are two types of exercise we're going to talk about the benefits of. You have aerobic activity, which is prolonged. It's approximately 30 minutes or longer. Resistance exercise is using a resistive force causing muscles to contract. So if you're pulling on something, it's pulling you back, or you're pushing on something, it's pushing down on you. That's resistance exercise. So why? Why do we need to do physical activity? Well, it's because of the sedentary lifestyle that is prevalent in so many Americans. Some of you guys are going to get jobs one day and you might be sitting at desks all day long at work. And it's actually been shown, according to the American College of Sports Medicine, more than 50% of your waking day involves activities with prolonged sitting. So sitting at your desk at school, or sitting around playing Fortnite and eating Cheetos, or watching TV, eating Cheetos. I like Cheetos. Can you tell? Those things, you sit around too long, and when you have a sedentary lifestyle, it improves your risk of all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease, different types of cancers, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. And obesity, unfortunately, is really prevalent in our society, especially among teenagers. According to the Center for Disease Control, if you're above the 95th percentile for your age and sex, you're obese. And that's actually, according to the National Center for Health Statistics, that's going to be 20.6% of you guys. So 1 in 5 teenagers between 12 and 17 years old is obese. And it leads to the same problems as a sedentary lifestyle. So that's why you need to do exercise. So what are the benefits, though, of aerobic activity? Well, according to the guidelines for exercise testing and prescription laid out by the ACSM, it increases your maximal oxygen uptake. It also increases the threshold of accumulation of lactate in the blood. This is for aerobic activity, more like running or prolonged things. So you can run like Forrest Gump does down here in the GIF. It also reduces body fat, especially intra-abdominal fat. That means that you get shredded. You get looking good for the beach. You also lower your incidence of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, all those things definitely affecting you when you're older. Bone fractures right now, you can, keep from breaking your bones, and that keeps you in the game longer if you play sports, and then you potentially get a scholarship and, of course, different types of cancer. But also, you can decrease your anxiety. There's been shown that exercise decreases anxiety and depression and improves cognitive function. So it can potentially help you improve your grades, making you more alert, making you more aware, helping you think more clearly. So that's some benefits of aerobic activity. Now, my favorite, resistance training benefits. Same stuff as aerobic activity, but here we got my little favorite acronym, get swole. So think of swole like this, some benefits. S is muscle strength. You can increase your muscle strength 40% in untrained individuals. Like if you haven't been training, you can go from benching 100 to 140 in just a few weeks. Muscle width is the W. You increase your size, your muscle size, so you look bigger, more jacked. O, you decrease the prevalence of obesity. So if you're untrained and you start training, you can decrease your body fat by 1 to 9%. And then the L is increase in lean body mass. So those three things combined increase your lean body mass, and you look jacked like SpongeBob with his inflatable arms. Some other benefits, management and treatment of type 2 diabetes, we talked about that. Increases in bone mass and bone strength, we talked about that. Less broken bones. It also reduces your risk of soft tissue injuries, sprains, strains, pulled muscles, because they get stronger. And that's actually one of the risks of exercise. So exercising actually reduces that risk if you do it right. But what are some of the other risks, you ask? Those things are good, but how can I, how do I prepare for these other things? Can't exercise be dangerous? And yes and no. If you do it right, it won't be as dangerous. If you do it wrong, it's going to be more dangerous. So some risks include those soft tissue injuries. There was actually a study done that showed 50% of injuries were lower back injuries in adolescent powerlifters. So these are people putting on lots of weight on their back, squatting or deadlifting, and that's hurting their lower back. And that makes sense. But a lot of us aren't going to do that. We're not powerlifters. It's related. These injuries are related to exercise intensity, type of exercise, and any pre-existing condition you might have. There's also risk for growth plate injuries, but most of that's caused by improper technique. And also, you have more risk of hurting those growth plate sites when performing jumping and landing movements in a game such as basketball, where you jump up and down a lot, or as a wide receiver in football. So more than resistance training, more than aerobic training. So some other risk factors are when you hit your growth spurt, your actual chronological age, or your biological age, because some people that are 12 look 18, and some people that are 18 look 12. It's weird. But that's a thing. That's how your body matures. Poor coaching, get a good coach that knows what he's talking about or she's talking about. And then previous injury, anything that you've done that's already hurt yourself. Something else is also pretty serious, is sudden cardiac death. It was serious enough that in the exercise testing and prescription by the ACSM, they wanted to mention it, the incidence rate for people between 13 and 24 years of age. For men, it's 1 in 133,000. For women, it's 1 in 769,000. And you're like, that's low. Yeah, but consider how many high schoolers are actually in the U.S. So take that with a grain of salt, because most of these incidents are caused by congenital abnormalities, so from birth, or hereditary abnormalities from your parents, things that existed before you started working out, not from working out themselves. But that is why the International Olympic Committee and the American Heart Association suggest that you take a pre-participation cardiovascular screening. Go get that done, so that way nobody has to worry about, is there anything going on with your heart before you start? So we've talked about the risks and the benefits. You're like, okay, that's great, but how do I do it? Or how much should I do? Well, here's some guidelines from the ACSM and AHA. These are mainly for 18 to 65-year-olds, but it's a good place to start. Moderate aerobic activity, 30 minutes for 5 days a week. Or vigorous aerobic activity, 20 minutes for 3 days a week, or a mixture of the two. And you want to sprinkle in some resistance training. Now, these are the bare minimum for these two organizations. It's a bare minimum. It's not going to get you the results that you want. You're going to have to go beyond that. So I think the physical activity guidelines for Americans lays it out better for teenagers. Moderate or vigorous intensity aerobic activity for at least an hour a day. And 3 days of the week, 3 of those days needs to be vigorous intensity activity. And 3 of those days needs to also be muscle strengthening and bone strengthening. So you can combine those 3 into 3 days a week, and the rest of the time it can be moderate or vigorous, just easygoing activity. Okay, so that's how much you should do. But you're like, okay, well, that's great, but what is moderate? What is vigorous? What does that look like? Here's some examples. Moderate activity. Clean the house like your mom asked you to. You know, sweeping and vacuuming and picking stuff up and around the house, mowing the lawn like your dad asked you to. Those are good moderate activities. Shooting around, basketball, balling with the homies, that kind of thing. Okay, vigorous activity, hiking steep grades. Go over here to Crowder's Mountain and go hike. That's a good vigorous one, running and jogging. Chopping wood. Some of you guys need to chop some wood. You need to get some blisters on your hands. Okay, and playing basketball. Then, of course, there's resistance exercise, body weight or weighted exercise, some yoga, sports involving change of direction, soccer, lacrosse, jumping rope, things like that. Those are good examples of physical activity. So go and do these things according to those guidelines that we just mentioned. So in conclusion, exercise is good for you. It will help with short-term and long-term effects of health. What you start now, guys, will affect you down the road. So start with something simple. Don't try to be a world beater. Don't try to run a marathon in 2 months. Don't try to bench 400 pounds in 3 weeks. Set goals, but set realistic goals, good goals. Get swole. Remember, muscle strengthening, muscle width, obesity prevalence decreases, increase in lean body mass. But take your time. Those things will come with time, maybe months, years even. And also, your risk of injury is reduced significantly when you follow the age-appropriate guidelines, which include a qualified supervision and instruction. So get somebody who knows what they're doing and go get swole. Thank you all very much.